You think you know what made a fighter plane deadly in World War II. The speed, the agility, the firepower. But imagine this. A single American fighter absorbing over 2,000 rounds of cannon fire and still making it home. The Germans couldn't believe it. Their aces, men who had downed dozens of Allied aircraft, were left stunned, confused, and frankly, terrified. This is the story of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the plane that refused to die. It's 1943. The skies over Europe have become a slaughterhouse. American bomber crews are flying deep into Nazi-occupied territory, trying to cripple Hitler's war machine. But there's a problem, a fatal problem. German fighter pilots, Luftwaffe aces with names like Galland, Hartmann, and Barkhorn, are ripping through Allied formations like wolves through sheep. Their Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s are fast, nimble, and armed with devastating 20mm cannons that can tear a bomber's wing clean off with a single burst. The Americans needed an answer. They needed a fighter that could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. They needed something that could go toe-to-toe with the Luftwaffe's best and survive. Enter the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Now, if you saw this thing on the tarmac, you'd think someone made a mistake. It was massive, the largest single-engine fighter of the entire war. It weighed 7 tons when fully loaded. That's more than some light bombers. Its fuselage was so wide that pilots joked it looked like a flying milk bottle. The Luftwaffe pilots, they called it Die Yugs, the Yugs, because it looked like a big, fat, flying jug of water. And they laughed at it. Imagine you're a German ace. You've downed 30, 40, maybe 50 Allied planes. You know every trick in the book. You know that when you put a burst of 20mm cannon shells into an enemy fighter, it's over. Then you see this monster lumbering through the sky. You think, easy kill. You line up your shot. You squeeze the trigger. Your cannons roar. 20mm explosive rounds, each one capable of punching through armor plate, slam into the American fighter. And then nothing happens. The P-47 doesn't explode. It doesn't break apart. It doesn't even seem to notice.
Here's what the Luftwaffe aces didn't understand, and what makes this story so insane. The P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't just tough, it was practically indestructible. Let me give you some numbers that'll make your head spin. There are documented cases of P-47s returning to base with over 2,000 hits from small arms and cannon fire. 2,000 hits. One pilot landed with 3 feet of his wing blown completely off. Another came home with a 6-foot hole in his fuselage big enough to crawl through. A third had his entire tail section held together by nothing but control cables and sheer willpower. And they all made it back. All of them. So, what was the secret? How did this flying jug become the most survivable fighter in the European theater? It comes down to 3 things, and this is where the story gets really dark. First, the engine. The P-47 was powered by a Pratt Whitney R-2800 double WASP radial engine. This thing was a beast. 2,000 horsepower, 18 cylinders, arranged in 2 rows. But here's the kicker. Radial engines are incredibly hard to kill. You see, German fighters used inline engines, all the cylinders in a neat little row, hit one cylinder, crack the coolant system, and the whole engine seizes up in minutes. The pilots got maybe 5 minutes to find somewhere to land or bail out. But a radial engine? You could blow 3, 4, even 5 cylinders completely off, and the thing would keep running. There are reports of P-47s flying home on just 9 functioning cylinders, half the engine gone, still flying. German pilots would pour fire into a Thunderbolt's nose, see pieces flying off, see smoke pouring out, and then watch in horror as the American just kept going. Second, the structure. Republic Aviation didn't just build the P-47. They over-engineered it to a degree that bordered on obsession. The fuselage was essentially a giant armored tube. The cockpit was surrounded by bulletproof glass and thick armor plating, some of it over an inch thick. The self-sealing fuel tanks could take multiple hits and not leak a drop. But here's the genius part, and this is what the Germans never figured out. The P-47 was designed with redundancy built into every system, dual hydraulic systems, backup control linkages, multiple fuel pumps. Even if half the plane's systems were shot to pieces, the other half could keep the pilot alive and flying. One pilot, Robert S. Johnson, was attacked by a German ace who poured over 200 rounds into his Thunderbolt at point-blank range. The canopy shattered, the instrument panel exploded, the rudder pedals were shot away. Johnson was wounded, bleeding, and barely conscious. He flew that crippled bird 200 miles back to England and landed it. When the ground crew counted the holes, they found over 200 separate hits. Third, and this is the darkest part, the Luftwaffe's own desperation. By 1944, Germany was losing the war. They were running out of fuel, ammunition, and time. Luftwaffe pilots were ordered to press their attacks closer and closer to make every bullet count. They would close to within 50 meters, sometimes closer, and just hold the trigger down, dumping everything they had into the target. And when the target was a P-47, it didn't matter. German after-action reports from this period are filled with frustration and disbelief. Pilots reporting heavy hits observed. Target did not go down. Entire ammunition load expended with no result. Attacked enemy fighter for several minutes. No effect. Imagine being one of these aces. You're flying a plane that's faster and more maneuverable. You've got years of combat experience. You do everything right. You pour hundreds of rounds into your target, and it just won't die. That's psychological warfare. That's when you realize you're not just fighting a superior plane, you're fighting a machine that your weapons can't kill.
So why does this story matter? Because the P-47 Thunderbolt changed the entire calculation of air warfare. Before the Thunderbolt arrived in force, German fighter pilots could dictate the terms of engagement. They could attack, withdraw, and attack again, knowing that a few good hits would end the fight. But the P-47 flipped the script. Suddenly, killing an American fighter required perfect accuracy, sustained fire, and a whole lot of luck. And the Germans didn't have any of those things in abundance. By the end of the war, P-47s had flown over 500,000 combat sorties, more than any other American fighter. They destroyed over 7,000 enemy aircraft, 9,000 locomotives, 86,000 trucks, and 6,000 armored vehicles. But more importantly, they brought their pilots home. The survival rate for P-47 pilots was significantly higher than any other fighter in the European theater. When you flew a Thunderbolt, you had a real chance of making it through the war alive. And for the Luftwaffe aces, those legendary pilots who had once dominated the skies, the P-47 represented something terrifying: inevitability. No matter how skilled you were, no matter how many kills you had, you couldn't kill what refused to die. The age of the ace was over. The age of the machine had begun. That's the dark truth
the Germans learned too late. Sometimes, survival is the ultimate weapon. If you want more forgotten stories from history's darkest corners, subscribe to The Last Stand. The past is full of secrets. We're here to uncover them.